with that, we can start the recording. Welcome everybody, my name is Benji Cohn. We're here with the 238th episode of the Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. It kind of screams spring fishing out there right now, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So yellow bass have kind of been a fish of special concern, I guess, for the last few years. So we got Jonah Dagel from our Windom Area fisheries office is going to join us and talk a little bit about yellow bass and why it's titled The Curious Case of Yellow Bass. And then after that, Jon Lore is going to join us. He's an avid angler down in the Fairmont area for yellow bass. So he's going to join us and talk about some tips and tricks to catching these fish. So I think, Jonah, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Benji. And welcome. Good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about kind of a new fish on the landscape in Minnesota, the yellow bass, mostly occurring in the southern part of the state right now, but definitely making an expansion north over time. Some of the goals that I want to cover today is locations where these fish have been illegally introduced, different water bodies down here in the southern part of the state. I'm going to cover some biology about yellow bass, the abundance that we're seeing in some of the lakes where they showed up, how fast they're growing. And then we've done some diet studies to see what they're eating and potential interactions or competition that they might be having with other panfish like bluegills or crappies or yellow perch. We'll take a little look at the public perception of yellow bass. Should we be concerned about their spread? Is it an opportunity for anglers in Minnesota? And then also there's been some shuffling in regulations regarding yellow bass down in the southern part of the state here. So we'll touch on those as well. So yellow bass are somewhat new to the landscape. They were first confirmed in Hall Lake, which is a lake in the Fairmont chain, during the winter of 2012 and 2013. There was an angler that reported catching one, and he harvested it, and an additional 6 to 8 were reported by a local bait shop down there that winter. And we confirmed that they're yellow bass. We did not sample them. When I say we, the DNR fisheries. But nonetheless, it was a confirmed report that they were in the Fairmont chain. Now, DNR didn't stock yellow bass. They were actually considered a species of special concern in Minnesota, as they only occurred in Lake Pepin on the Mississippi River. They hadn't been found anywhere else in the state, and that is not really the case right now. So it was likely through an illegal introduction. Yellow bass angling was really popular on East Lake Okoboji, and then also Clear Lake, Iowa, which are both just over the border down in Iowa. So we don't have proof that that's where they came from, but it's highly likely that they were moved illegally from Iowa into Minnesota. And, we're biologists that have studied how to manage fish populations, and I guess people that take it upon themselves to move fish around themselves, we term bucket biologists occasionally. Here's a picture, a little graphic to put in there showing somebody releasing some live fish. And then the media also put out an article in the Mankato Free Press talking about some of the harmful effects that introducing a new species water body can have on a system of lakes. So the next few slides, I'm going to go through their expansion, I guess. This slide is yellow bass detections pre-2013. As you can see, there's several populations down in Iowa, as depicted by the orange cross. And then there's that population over in the Mississippi River that it was very low abundance. Not, there weren't many of them. It just kind of occurred there. 2013, that's when they showed up in Martin County in the Fairmont chain of lakes. Or I guess that's when we first had the report that somebody had caught some. Fast forward to 2016, and they showed up in Clear Lake by Jackson, which historically has been one of our better walleye fisheries in the area. And then also down in Iowa, you can see that there are a few more populations that popped up, depicted by the triangles in Big Spirit, Center Lake, Five Island, Ingham Lake, and Silver Lake down there in Lake Park, Iowa. So somebody was busy between 2013 and prior to 16. Then in 2017, a population showed up down in southern Iowa at Pleasant Lake. So that, they made quite the trek there. 2018, we had another report of yellow bass in Martin County. This time it was in Lake Okemepeden, which is a Iowa-Minnesota border water. And then also down in Iowa, they sampled yellow bass for the first time in Storm Lake and then also Rice Lake. 2021, we had the yellow bass show up in Imogene Lake, which is another lake over in Martin County to the east of Fairmont. And to this day, there's multiple year classes out there, and I believe a survey is coming up on that lake within the next year or two, so it'll be interesting to see how that population has done over the last couple of years. 2024, they kind of started a trek further north. We sampled them in Cottonwood Lake, which is right here in the city of Windom, Minnesota. We had anglers report that they caught them, and then we usually use Cottonwood Lake to get fish for county fairs, tanks at the county fairs. And in our sampling for that, we observed young of the year, yellow bass, and also adults. So not only were they illegally stocked in Cottonwood Lake, they also got off a year class through natural. And then moving on to 2025, they moved up Highway 60 up to Mountain Lake, which is about 10 miles to the northeast of Windom. And that population appears to have been there for a while, as some of the fish in that system are 10 inches plus. So as of right now, this is where we have detected yellow bass in the state. And as you can see, they're pretty systematically moving north and expanding east to west. So to zoom in on a certain system of lakes, we'll look at Fairmont. That is a chain of lakes. It has 5 lakes. Starting from the north, it's George Lake, Sisseton, Bud, Hall, and Amber. And these lakes are managed by the Windom Area Fisheries Office. The primary management species are walleye and muskellunge. And muskies were first introduced in 2016 and have been stocked mostly every other year since. Obviously, 2020 messed with the stocking rotation because of COVID. But these lakes have historically been known as quality panfish lakes, mostly for their bluegill and crappie angling. And really, for the southern part of the state, they're pretty diverse in that they had 25 different kinds of fish sampled in the standard survey and index of biotic integrity survey done in 2018. So now to look at abundance of yellow bass in Fairmont, kind of a timeline here. 2013, we didn't sample any, or pre-2013, we didn't sample any. In 2014, we observed fish when we were electrofishing in Hall and Bud Lakes. There's a picture of one. Oops. Go back there. And then as we go on through the years, of course, we started catching them in surveys throughout the chain. We don't survey, each lake is treated as an individual survey, but we don't survey them all in the same year. So as you can see in Bud Lake, we had a fairly low abundance in 2017, and by 2020, we had an abundance of about 50 per gill net. Same thing in George Lake, 2017, we had, I believe it was around 30 per gill net, and that population really expanded in 2021 up to around 300 per gill net. And in 2018, Sisseton and Hall were surveyed and kind of started out similar, where it was a fairly low abundance. And Hall Lake, moving on to 2020, you can see that the population in Hall Lake really expanded about 150 per gill net. And then it's starting to look like, we may have reached the peak abundance, but it's still fairly early to tell if that's the case. It seems like the abundances in our standard surveys, the gill nets in our standard surveys, seem to be flattening out or decreasing a little bit. So it'll be interesting in the next couple of years to see how this plays out, and if the abundances stay at this little bit lower level, or if we see a jump in the population again. So like I said before, yellow bass have really expanded in our area, and so some other populations that we have are in Jackson County, Clear Lake in Jackson County. It's just west of the city of Jackson. And they were first sampled, the first standard survey where we could get an idea of abundance was in 2019, and we sampled around 5 per gill net. And then 4 years later, in 2023, the abundance jumped up to 10 per gill net. But when you're looking at this relative to the Fairmont chain, these are both fairly low abundances, and that could be a function of having population and northern pike population in Clear Lake. But it's kind of hard to tell how that population is going to continue to grow or increase. But we'll get a better idea in 2027 when we do our next standard survey on Clear Lake. It'll be kind of interesting to see what the yellow bass abundance looks like next summer. Another lake, Cottonwood County, like I said before, we observed young of the year fish during electrofishing, and really it's pretty common to observe them out there now whenever we're doing any sampling on Cottonwood Lake. Mountain Lake, last year we did a largemouth bass electrofishing survey in the spring, and we kept track of yellow bass, and they were caught at a rate of 29, almost 30 per hour of electrofishing. It's kind of hard to relate to gill net catches, but nonetheless, these are fairly big fish, 10 plus inches. A couple of different year classes or sizes present. So it seems like they're pretty well established in Mountain Lake as well. And Mountain Lake will be getting surveyed this summer, so it'll be interesting to see what the gill net catch rate is in Mountain Lake. Imogene Lake in 2021, the survey caught 8.5 per gill net. Again, not a real high abundance compared to the Fairmont chain when we're looking at 150 to 300 per gill net. And there has not been a survey done on Imogene since 2021, so I believe there will be one coming up in 27 or 28 to get an idea of what that population has done over a number of years. Okeman Lake, which is a Iowa-Minnesota border water, we haven't caught them in a survey out there. We haven't sampled them, but the presence has been confirmed by the Iowa DNR, so I don't have a lot of abundance information on those. So one thing that could potentially be a concern with yellow bass is that they tend to populate really fast. They're very prolific. They produce a lot of eggs, a lot of young, and over time, it might affect yellow bass growth. So in our surveys in Fairmont, we look at mean length at age to get an idea how fast these fish are growing. In 2018 in Sisseton, they were reaching about 10 inches by age 5. Kind of same pattern in Hall Lake, following the same curve, 6.5 inches at 1, 8.5 at 2, and around 10 inches at 5. Seeing the same thing in George in 2021. And also in 2022, Hall Lake showed similar pattern. And then this part is where might start to see a little bit of concern. On the Bud Lake survey in 2024, you can see the black squares with the yellow lines inside. That's mean length at age of Bud Lake yellow bass. And as you can see at age 5, well, actually at age 2, 3, 4, and 5, yellow bass were consistently about an inch shorter than the mean length at those other populations I talked about before. So that's an indication that maybe the growth is slowing a little bit as time goes on. So that's something that we're going to want to monitor and consider, because over time down in Iowa, they've experienced, as the populations age, the size of the yellow bass decreases to a point where anglers don't desire to harvest them anymore. Same thing with Hall, the orange diamonds, kind of showing a similar growth to Hall Lake, George Lake. So again, indications that growth might be slowing, but something to monitor. Place a curve through those points. You can see that on average, they're probably growing about an inch less throughout their life than when they did early on after their introductions. So 5 to 7 years after introduction, they came in growing well. 10 plus years after introduction, it appears that growth maybe has slowed down a little bit. Then you plot clear on there, and remember we first surveyed that in 19, sampled them I think the year before, and growth of those fish is really off the charts. You're getting 11-inch yellow bass by age 4, and fit a line through it. They're probably 2 to 3 inches larger at the same age as compared to fish that are like George in 2025 and Hall or Bud Lake in 2024. So Clear Lake, it appears that they're growing well yet, but they haven't been in that lake as long as they have been in the Fairmont chain. Again, just comparing the Fairmont chain to some of the populations in Iowa. Again, growth in 20, pretty consistent with what we were seeing in Iowa, at Clear Lake in Iowa. And then some of the older populations like Little Wall and Cornelia, you can see that growth has really slowed. They don't get nearly as big in those systems. So these I considered the newer populations up here, showing pretty good growth, and then these older populations tend to show a little bit slower growth. So we're hoping we don't see that a whole lot over time in our populations, but again, the introductions and the timeline, we're still relatively new into this, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over time. Yeah, so like I said, we looked at some diets. We did mean or percent, let's see, we percent wet weight of yellow bass diets. and black crappies and yellow perch. Compare, look, put the diet contents under a scope, see what they had in them. For the most part, they were eating invertebrates, zooplankton, and just stuff that I couldn't identify. I think maybe one or two fish had other fish in them. I'll go to this slide. So the first two bars on the left, those are black crappies from 2018 and black crappies from 2025. As you can see there, crappies tend to consume more zooplankton than either yellow bass or yellow perch. But I guess in general, overall, what I want you to get from this slide is that it's a low sample size. All the diets are heavily dependent on invertebrates, and we're not sure if the prey resource will become limited over time. So are yellow bass a problem? They tend to overpopulate, which leads to slow growth. We see that their diets maybe overlap diets of yellow perch, bluegill, and crappie. So over time, will they outcompete native fish? They're very prolific. A 10-inch female can have anywhere from 70 to 142,000 eggs. Not meaning they'll all hatch, but they produce a lot of eggs. And we've seen that they produce a year class or reproduce about every year. So they're good at building up a robust population. So that's the question. Are they a problem or an opportunity? This is an aerial photo from Fairmont. I don't recall what year it is, but you can see that it draws a lot of people out there to target yellow bass, and John's going to touch on that later. And it's really common for people to travel from long distances to come fish a Fairmont chain, Des Moines, Twin Cities, Mankato, even a party from Nebraska that I talked to. And people, they are good to eat. They provide good table fare, and they're abundant. Just a couple angler photos. This was prior to regulation being put on them. People would just stack them up. Clear Lake did produce a state record in May of 2024. That's when yellow bass qualified to be a state record. It was 12.5 inches and a pound and 3 ounces. So, I think there is a record bass in Clear Lake yet. It's just a matter of catching it at the right time of year. Here's a few more pictures, 5-gallon buckets full, fish on the ice. I even saw a picture where they had like 4 otter sleds that were full, and again, that was prior to the any regulation being put on them. Even there's a guide service that's taking advantage of the yellow bass fishing in Fairmont. There's been outdoor television shows that come down and film down in Fairmont, so it's drawing a lot of attention. So pre-2025, there was no limit on yellow bass. And then in March 2025, there was a limit of 30 yellow bass and white bass combined. So you needed to know how to tell the difference between a yellow bass and a white bass. And I guess the main feature is that if you look at their spinous dorsal fin and then their soft dorsal fin, those two fins are slightly connected, whereas a white bass, those fins are completely separated. Then also, if you look at the striping on a yellow bass, it'll have broken offset stripes, and a white bass, the stripes will be continuous. So if you are out, angling in an area that has both of these species present, it would be good to have an idea of how to tell the difference. Then in March 2026, there was a special regulation put on the Fairmont Chain Lakes, Lake Imogene, and then Clear Lake and Jackson to increase the daily limit to 100 yellow bass. And then there is no possession limit on that. And that was really, the public wanted that since they were used to no limit. And it's from what we've seen so far is that these yellow bass populations can sustain that amount of harvest. So I guess in conclusion, I think we can expect illegal introductions to continue, and there are consequences for illegally moving fish in Minnesota without a permit. Uh, Anywhere from a small fine with a misdemeanor, fishing and hunting license suspension, and if they're aquatic invasive species get involved, then it turns into a more serious situation. So it's just not good to move fish because there's a lot of thought put into managing a lake for what it should be managed for, a lot of planning, and it's best just to let fisheries biologists take care of the lake. Again, they can probably move through lakes that are connected to lakes that have yellow bass. It's important as a biologist to understand anglers' perception of yellow bass and angling opportunities. How many can they keep, or how many do they want to keep? Just a whole bunch of different things to consider. And then it's important to monitor their populations, and then also monitor the populations of yellow perch, bluegill, and crappie. And I went through that fairly quick, but I know you want to hear about how to catch these things and some tips and tricks from Jon. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Jon.
Thanks, Jonah. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, and as Jon's pulling up his PowerPoint here and how to catch them, that it is a species of special concern, and transporting any live fish and is illegal. So definitely not encouraging people to do this. We want to keep these yellow bass where they're at and not expand their range for sure. So Jon, I'll turn it over to you, and you can share with us how to help manage these fish by hopefully coming down there and catching a few.
Hey, can you hear me and see everything all right?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, perfect. I guess so. My part of today's presentation is making lemonade out of lemons. This is not something that we wanted in the Fairmont Channel Lake, but we have made the opportunity to um, kind of educate the public, show the benefit of catching fish, how to catch them, all these things, and I'll go through that today. But my name is Jon Lore. You've probably seen me in previous presentations in this series talking about the job that I do with the DNR, but today I am just presenting to you as an angler and using private photos that have been published on my son's social media. So just giving them credit without promotion. A little background of my history with yellow bass angling. You saw in Jonah's presentation, Clear Lake, Iowa has had yellow bass for a long time. The first time that I encountered them was summer of 2003. We were just bobber fishing in the summer and started catching them with a minnow, just one after another. And you start to get that passion just by feeling the fight of the fish, catching one on every cast, having great table fare. So that's kind of where it started. You get into like catching them during the spawn, and it really, really charges you up. And then if you really dial them in on ice fishing, it can really make for a great winter. So when I moved over to Spirit Lake, I started fishing the Iowa Great Lakes into, spring of 2011, and catching yellow bass on shore, catching them out in the boat, then catching them in the wintertime. Just kind of learning different things, like different lakes have different features, obviously, and East Okoboji is more of a basin lake, which kind of brought me to how to find them in Fairmont, starting around spring of 2019. And all of these fisheries I still will travel to catch yellow bass. Some of the benefits of yellow bass angling, one of the number one things I think of is it's great for kids. If we're on a good bite and we see people not catching fish, like we're calling them over, we're teaching them how to catch them. It gets the kids interested in the sport. It's fast action. They love seeing a pile of fish. Maybe they're not going to eat all of them, but they can give them to friends. They can have a big fish fry with a family or a church event or whatever. And we also give them to friends that don't fish but love to eat fish, and to the elderly that obviously can't do any more fishing, but they still love the taste of fish. So most of my presentation will be talking about how to target yellow bass in Fairmont, Minnesota. So one of the things that I'm always targeting is break lines. A lot of the lakes have basins, so they kind of swim at the line from the basin to the break line, and I'll show you more about that. But they're always moving, but they're generally in the same area. And if you can get into those break line areas, you get more schools working swimming together, so you can have a better opportunity to pile a bunch of fish. The area of the lake that we fish is generally very similar throughout the year, but the depths change based on different things that are going on. And really, size of lure and presentation change. For the most part, we're using one lure almost all year round, but this time of year we really downsize, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And probably one of the number one things that you can take from this is that if you aren't catching anything, you need to move. We express that a lot, and you're going to see that a lot in this presentation. So I'm going to refer to Bud Lake just because it's a typical basin lake, and it has a good depth map where if you look on Hall, there's a lot of depth maps that are pretty inaccurate. So Bud is a good one for discussing. It's also one of the most popular yellow bass lakes in the chain. There's several big schools around the lake in the basin corners, and you have a really good opportunity to catch a mixed bag of bluegills, perch, and crappies, which is always nice too when you're out angling to get a multi-species bag. Certainly, there's really good population of crappies right now that are a little small, but if you get into the bluegills, there's some really nice bluegills in the Fairmont Channel Lake, and perch are really working their way up too, so it's great. When I'm talking about these corners, these four black areas are pretty much the areas that I'll target on Bud Lake. That doesn't mean that that's the only place that there's fish. There's certainly other areas, but it's the areas where those fish will concentrate, and you have a better chance of piling them up pretty quickly. So starting off with spring, because that's where we're at right now. Right after ice out, you're still targeting those deeper parts on the edge of the basin. They're schooled up. They're still in those wintering areas. And what we're using is these pilkies, this gold jig that's in the middle of the page. Generally, we are using a more shiny one. Sometimes we use yellow and orange, but gold, silver are pretty much our go-to lures. And what you're doing is bouncing them off the bottom and slowly lifting them up. And one of the things that's really nice about pilkies is that they're so heavy that you get back down to the fish before they lose interest. So that's the same with ice fishing. These fish have like ADHD or something. Like if they're not entertained, they're gone and they keep moving. So, but if you get fish to move to get caught and start coming up the water column, the school will just kind of swarm in like this, and then you're on them for, until they lose interest. Now this time, like right now, water temp 60 to 70 degrees. This is anywhere from pre-spawn to full spawn, and this is some of the best fishing you can have. Shore fishing. Last weekend it was great because all the shore fishing spots that I even know about were loaded with people, which is, tough if you want to go catch some fish, but it's great for the people that are out there having fun and catching fish. And these fish are generally in depths of 1 to 4 feet. Rocky and gravel bottoms. They're very aggressive. Once they get to a point where they're actually spawning, you can cast right in between them and they won't even look at your jig. So, but all of this pre-spawn time frame is excellent fishing. And just a week ago today, we caught about 150 in 2 hours from the shoreline. So pretty amazing. But during that time, we're using these Cubby mini mites. Or any kind of small 32nd ounce jig with a plastic and just a piece of worm that's maybe about 1 inch long, just something that they're going to bite on, keeping it above their head and just slowly drifting it across. And then another thing is don't give up on your cast until you're literally on the shoreline, because they'll follow you all the way in. So right here, there's a quick video. My son, we were catching him every cast. He was using a mini mite, as you can kind of see. I was saying, prove it. We were catching him on every cast, and he had kind of a short cast, but right away, bang. That's how fast the action was for 2 hours. Literally, what takes the time that you're not catching them, multiple fish per minute, is just that you have to take them off the hook and cast back out, and reel them in. So, and they are hard fighting. Summer fishing. So once they get done spawning, they'll start moving back out. Generally targeting a little deeper water in the afternoons because the water will be a little bit cooler. We don't go all the way out in the basin because it's likely that there could be a thermocline, pour oxygen off the bottom. So we're kind of in between there along the ridge, 10 to 15 foot of water, and then mornings and evenings we'll move shallower to 6 to 10 foot. Again, stay mobile. One of the things that we can do to cover ground is cast pilkies out and bounce them off the bottom while we're retrieving. So the water temps are warm enough that these fish are chasing pilkies at this point. Obviously, if you have good electronics like forward-facing sonar, you can take a lot of the guesswork out of this, and you just find the school and just start piling them up. We don't use forward-facing sonar yet, but it's something that, it takes a lot of the guesswork out. Another way of covering ground and putting minimal effort in is trolling. So these fish are super aggressive in the summertime. One way we've found them is to, like if you're bottom bouncer fishing for walleyes, eventually you'll run into the school and you'll be catching multiples at a time. Or if you're trolling flicker shads and you go through a section where you get doubles on flicker shads or triples, however many crankbaits you have out there, you found the school, and then you can get closer, do spot lock, anchor off, whatever, and start casting pilkies and bouncing off the bottom, and you'll have action all day long. One of the things that I've heard people talk about is bad taste with yellow bass in the summertime. Generally, the water quality changes. It gets green water in Fairmont. If you don't take care of the meat, you're going to taste a little bit of that. So we always put our fish on ice pretty much year round, just because meat preservation, especially when you have this many fish to clean when you get home, is very important. Fall fishing is very similar to spring patterns, just the opposite in their daily movement. They'll be deeper in the morning and evening and shallower during the day as they're trying to stay warm with those surface temps picking up during the sunlight hours. Again, broken record, we're casting pilkies, cover ground, and based on the water temperatures, you may slow or speed up your retrieval speed. And then before ice up, when you get 40-degree water temp, 35, something like that, you want to go back to what that early spring was, where you're vertical jigging in the basins again. Now, ice fishing, this is when yellow bass really get targeted in the Fairmont chain. I mean, ice fishing and during the spawn are probably the two time frames where they really get targeted, and it's for good reason, because those are the times that you can get those big piles that everyone sees in the pictures in a short period of time too. I mean, we generally don't fish for more than 2 or 3 hours at a time when we're getting these piles of fish. One of the other good things is that a lot of fish species have kind of that dead of winter lull, especially in southern Minnesota. Yellow bass don't really have that. You can catch them from ice on to ice out, and generally, there's fish biting somewhere. So I'll show a little bit about how I break down a section of Bud Lake and drilling these holes in a pattern. I always work from deep to shallow. Again, remember, I don't have forward-facing sonar, so I'm maybe making an educated guess, but fishing blind without that. And then kind of like they said, the areas stay the same, but the depths can change on where they're at throughout the day and from day to day. Again, using these pilkies, we tip them with 5 to 8 red spikes, and I'll show you why. You need a lot of meat on there just because you have a lot of swing and misses that end up taking the bait. So if your line's not baited up and you're not catching fish, then those fish lose interest and you end up moving again. Most of the time we have to stay mobile. Unless you find what we call a mega school, you don't set up your tent and sit on them all day and just catch them hand over fist. Like it takes some hole hopping to catch that many fish. And again, I can't express enough that if you aren't catching fish, you have to move. And you may not have to move very far either. I've had times where they move out from under the shack and they're only 15 feet away, but they won't come back to the shack. So the northeast corner of Bud Lake is where I send a lot of people to fish. I'll zoom in right there. You can see those tight contours. You can see that little basin corner that the fish get stacked in there together. And this works for bluegills, crappies, yellow bass, all kinds of fish. And then I'll start drilling holes. So I'll work out deep into the basin because sometimes they're out there, and then walk about 50 feet and drill another hole. And then I'll have a pattern all the way up to the shoreline before I start using my depth finder. And then we will walk through, check with the depth finder. If my son's along, he'll be walking through as I'm drilling holes to make things go a little faster. But generally those fish will be under there, or if you jig each hole I always say about 100 jigs. If they haven't come in, it's time to move. So that's kind of how we find them in a more efficient manner. And then once you find them, this is what your depth finder is going to look like. You always want to stay above them. They love to come up, but one of the things that a lot of people struggle with when I talk to them is that the fish were coming up flying, but they didn't bite. And part of that is just the bite detection on these fish. I'll show in the next video. They don't come up and slam it. They come up and grab the bait and sit there. So when you're jigging, you want to keep it moving. And then all of a sudden your jig will just do something a little different. It'll be slacklined or something like that. You have to have a very ultralight rod so you can detect that. But then you set the hook immediately. And that's how you end up catching them one after another after another. It's not that they're an aggressive bite in many cases. A lot of times you can't feel it. A lot of times if you do feel it, that's when they grab your hook and they spit it out. And just that spit makes your pole go, and then you set the hook and nothing's there. So real quick, I want to show this underwater footage of what it looks like when we're jigging for yellow bass, and just watch real close on the left how the jig is reacting, or how the jig is moving and how the fish is reacting to it. So you see he's coming up while he's moving. My son stops and that fish moves away, and he moves it. He's coming in. He grabs the spikes. He ripped off 4 or 5 of them in one little bite. Now he comes again. He ripped off another 1 or 2. And there's only 1 spike left. And they're kind of looking at it. They kind of do that. And finally, he got the hook set on him. So expect to have a lot of swing and misses with these things. Not always. They have a relatively small mouth, so they don't always get the hook in their mouth, but they are definitely good at robbing bait. So some of the conclusions: yellow bass can provide very fast action fishing. They're hard fighting for the size. They're great for kids and adults and all that like to catch fish. As Jonah talked about, they're great to eat. Could do a whole presentation on different ways of cooking them. But generally fried fish, baked, any way you want to make yellow bass, they're very mild. They're very much like any panfish in southern Minnesota. The limit, like Jonah said, the limit's now 100 per person in Fairmont and some other select lakes, only 30 per person on other lakes. I encourage you to come down, have fun, catch as many as you want to clean, and share the meat with friends, family, or whoever. I don't want them going to waste. Some things that people do which is illegal, is getting a whole bucket full and dumping them in the ditch as they're leaving, just because they think they're doing good work and keeping them out of the system. We don't want that. So enjoy. And if you have any questions, I do have my personal email address here that you can send them to. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can see what's going on.
Thanks for that, John. Again, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the Slido function there. Again, down the bottom right-hand corner there, the 3 little ellipses. Click on the Slido app and enter your questions in there. So that's a good point, John. You were talking about people just catching them and not really wanting to clean them. So I love your point about catching as many as you want to clean as you're willing to clean. I remember with my grandpa out catching panfish, is like, oh, that's enough. I don't want to clean anymore. That was kind of the rule of thumb. So,
yep,
it's a good suggestions. There seems like there's always people out there willing to take some fish off your hands if you have extras. So
that's absolutely true.
Make friends with some anglers. Come back up to the cities, let me know. But
all right,
take care of some of those. So I don't see any questions in here right now. So you guys did a great job of covering everything. So I did put in the chat that article, Jonah, that you sent from the Minnesota Conservation Volunteer called Wrong Fish, talking about, the reason we don't transport fish. And as you said, a bucket biologist putting fish in a lake that doesn't necessarily have that fish or need that fish in it. Try to educate people on why we don't do that. So, oh, here's one coming in. Find it. Somebody asked for illegal introductions. Do you have an estimate how big they were when they were introduced? Was there a dumping village or something bigger that was introduced into the lake?
I guess I don't have a really good guess. Obviously, I think they were probably adults. I guess, for instance, on Mountain Lake, the first time that we detected them, they were fairly large, which would indicate to me that they were put in there as adults. Because we're on Mountain Lake quite a bit too, getting panfish for stocking in kids' ponds and whatnot. So we keep pretty good tabs on it, and they showed up as large fish, and since they've been reproducing. As far as the quantity that typically get moved around, I don't have a good answer for that either. They are very prolific and produce a lot of eggs, so it likely would not take many fish to jumpstart a population.
Yeah, again, this is illegal. So transporting fish, live fish, is illegal to do. And both of you were telling me, I wasn't aware of this. Don't live down the southwestern part of the state, but even you can leave these fish out or in a bucket of half frozen slush or snow, and they'll survive for a while. So if you are, moving them, have them even in a boat or in a bucket, and dump one in a lake, that could be enough to kickstart stuff. So they're pretty hardy fish.
Yeah, and I think we want to emphasize that you don't want to dispose of bait or unwanted fish in a lake, because they do tend to live quite a while after they're taken out of the water. And even though you might think they're dead, they, especially these yellow bass, seem like they can survive a long time without being in water. So it's important to take care of the fish that you catch and clean them and put them to use. And we don't want to waste resources.
Great. Another question here: how many years would it take to determine if yellow bass are detrimental to the native species?
That's a good question. So in Fairmont, we first detected them in 2013, I guess, 2014, around in there. And now we're, 13 or 14 years down the road, and we haven't really detected any detrimental effects to the panfish populations. In fact, like John mentioned, Bud Lake has great bluegill size structure and abundance, and the crappie population is looking really good in Fairmont. They're a little bit small right now, but still abundant. So I guess I can somewhat say that it's more than 13 or 14 years, but I'm not sure what the best or how long it's going to take to actually see if there's any effects on other fish in the system.
Yeah, and I will add to that, from an angler's perspective, you may not feel like the crappie population's doing that well because the yellow bass are so aggressive. A lot of times they can get to the bait before the native species do. Or, I mean, I've had times where you're catching native or natural species, that, we're still dealing with native species, but natural species to the lake, and you're catching them, and then the yellow bass actually see those fish coming up the hole, and they come in and start targeting you. So, the populations are doing pretty well of the species that are usually in there, but getting to them can be a challenge at times.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think the title was a curious case of yellow bass, and what I have observed of them in general is that they're a curious fish. Like you said, John, if you're reeling in a crappie and they see that silver flash in the water, they're coming over to check it out just because they're curious. Same thing with the lures you use, gold and silver. They want to check out and see what's shining. So yeah, that was a good point.
Yeah. And then the obvious follow-up question, if they're not detrimental, if we find they do great in some of these lakes, in some point down the road, would the DNR think of stocking them in other lakes to boost the fisheries or boost tourism in areas? It's probably too early to tell or even think about that, but
yeah, right now we haven't stocked them or introduced them into any lakes, and we don't intend to because of down in Iowa they do tend to overpopulate and their growth slows to a point where they're undesirable. So right now we don't have any intention of doing that, but obviously it's something that could be considered in the future if there needs to be change in how we manage our fish populations in Minnesota.
we're always learning more, right? So
Yep.
Research always continues, and we keep learning more and more all the time. So I don't see any other questions in there. So I want to remind everybody, this is the last series of our, the last webinar of our spring series. So our summer series should be live here, hopefully by the end of the week, if not next week for sure. We got some great episodes coming up this summer, starting with 239. We're going to explore, talking about regulations again, but on the duck hunter side. So we're talking about exploring new regulations with duck hunters. We have a few fishing webinars on muskies and fishing in the BWCA, and we're going to talk about moose research in Minnesota. So keep an eye out in your email boxes. The newsletter will be coming out shortly, and keep an eye on our website, mndnr.gov/discover, and join us, register for those this summer. And hopefully everybody can get outside the next couple weeks and enjoy maybe some good yellow bass fishing. Take a tour down to Fairmont. It's a really kind of a unique area of the state. It's a cool fisheries down there. It'd be fun to get down there and catch some. So I think with that, Jonah and John, thank you so much for sharing your passion and knowledge on yellow bass in Minnesota. We appreciate you joining us. And everybody get outside, share the outdoors with somebody new. And if you do catch too many fish down there, or at least one person over here that'll take a couple off your hands. Thanks. Take care and stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.